Good evening, you're welcome to GHOne Television, and this is News Tonight. Everywhere you are, I'm sure you have been marking the celebration of the memorial of Sergeant Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. And so this edition of News Tonight will bring you a lot of updates of what people have been doing across the country, from political parties to whateve you. Well, this is me, Patrick Stevenson.
And I am Abena, Owusu, Nyamekye. Let's take a look at the headlines.
Well, it is Founders Day turned Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Day today. We will tell you how the day was marked by the Convention People's Party as they implored Ghanaians to disregard the MPP's founders' proposal.
And the NDC has been working for Nkrumah to protest plans to introduce J.B. Dankwa on the founders' history books, but Samia Nkrumah calls their action hypocritical.
This is hypocritical. You establish Founders Day, but you don't implement a single Nkrumah's policy.
Meanwhile, EIB marks Nkrumah's birthday with a heritage forum amid calls from Nyamekye for citizens to free themselves of their slavery mentality and embrace Ghana's heritage.
Well, I am president now, but I want to be president forever. Now, this is a craze that has caught on with Africa as many presidents change their constitutional term limits. Tonight, we throw the spotlight on a few countries and if Africa is headed for danger.
And our Timeline team continues their fishing expedition tonight with stories of why women don't go to sea, but also how fishermen survive the harsh life at sea to make sure you get your daily dose of protein. We will bring you updates on these and some other stories in business, sports, and on the international front in this bulletin. Stay with us.
And when they say we I was say
You're welcome to News Tonight. Let's begin with stories surrounding the Founders Day today. Now, daughter of Osagyefo for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Samia Yaba Nkrumah, has described as needless the debate over who founded Ghana and who needs to be celebrated. According to the former chairperson of the CPP, the Founders Day controversy is a deliberate attempt by Ghana's political elite to score cheap points. Samia Nkrumah's comment follows reactions that have greeted President Akufo-Addo's proposal to change the Founders Day from September 21st to August 4th.
In 2010, the late President, Professor John Evans Atta Mills, established the Founders Day to celebrate the birthday of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. This sparked a debate over Ghana's founders and concerns that other key players in the fight for independence were being sidelined. Some years down the line, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo issued an executive instrument to rename September 21 Nkrumah Memorial Day, and he has proposed legislation to designate August 4 as Founders Day. This time, the debate is sharply divided among three schools of thought. A section of Ghanaians believe that a nation can never have one founding father, thus celebrating Kwame Nkrumah as the sole founder of Ghana is inappropriate, while others also belong to the school of thought that hails Dr. Kwame Nkrumah as the lone wolf who fought his way through the freedom fight for Ghana, as his colleague politicians either sabotaged him or looked on unconcerned. Thus, they say, celebrating him as the founder of Ghana is the least a country can do for its heroes. Those in the third bracket have described the debate as needless and baseless because it is not important who founded Ghana, whether Kwame Nkrumah or the leaders of UGCC. They believe that the most important thing is Ghana had independence, and so all past, present and future heroes should be celebrated on its Republic Day, which is July 1. But it appears the daughter of the man whose celebration has become contentious will have none of the above argument. Samia Yaba Nkrumah simply wants her father's vision to be brought to life.
For the past few decades, the political elite has been suppressing Nkrumah's policies. What we are interested in is the policies and ideas of that great leader. You can shout from now till tomorrow to say Kwame Nkrumah is the founder, but if you are ignoring his policies, if you come to power and you are neglecting his policies, then it has no meaning.
Even though the NDC hit the street today in a solidarity march to protest Nanado's August 4 proposal, Samia Nkrumah maintains the largest opposition party is just being hypocritical.
The NDC has suppressed Nkrumah's policies. The NDC too. That's why I said the political elite has been anti-Nkrumah. Let's face it, because the NDC was in power and divested state assets, selling our national assets without us knowing where they went to, who are they productive or not.
But they established the Founders Day.
They established it and without legislation. But that's what I'm saying. This is hypocritical. You establish Founders Day, but you don't implement a single Nkrumah's policy. But on the contrary, you allow foreign interests to exploit your people. What is Nkrumahist about that? So I have to come to the conclusion that this debate is being used for political, just to earn some cheap political points.
Nkrumah, I am with the downers of emotions informing you that the Ghana you left for us is growing, but at a slower pace.
As part of the commemorative event, a forum was put together at the University of Ghana Institute of African Studies, where participants discussed Nkrumah's ideology, the birth of a new nation Ghana, as well as effort at nation building.
Now, in a related development, Nkrumah's CPP has charged Ghanaians to remain resolute and not be swayed by the ongoing struggle to recognize J.B. Dankwa and others who helped in the independence struggle. The party touted Nkrumah as the only founder of Ghana as it marked the first president's birthday.
The long-standing debate about Founders Day versus Founders Day is gaining more attention than we thought. The debate started early this year with President Akufo-Addo's speech delivered at Ghana's 60th Independence Anniversary Parade. Just last Sunday, September 17 this year, the president made known his intention to designate August 4 as Founders Day and to mark 21st September as Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Day. This obviously does not sit well with the CPP, who maintain Nkrumah is the one true founder of Ghana.
The CPP considers as unfortunate recent attempts by reactionary forces to once again attempt to rewrite the history of Ghana.
Chairman, tell them all.
And water down the contribution of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah to the emancipation of the black man as well as Ghana's independence. Osagyefo is the foundation stone of Ghana and a leading pacemaker for the emancipation of Africa.
Other members of the CPP equally aired their views on the matter.
My personal opinion is that neither 21st September nor 4th of August need to be days set aside for this celebration. In other words, both days should be scrapped. We already have 6th of March. We already have 1st of July. So why the need for additional holidays to celebrate what we know are already facts? It's a fact that Kwame Nkrumah was a founder of Ghana. That one is not in dispute. It's also a fact that lots of other people also contributed long before him. It's also a fact that people are still contributing to the development of this nation. So for me, the debate is not necessary.
Comrades and friends, I feel very sad today. I am very, very sad today that today We are arguing about whether Nkrumah is the founder of Ghana or is not the founder of Ghana and so on. The fact is that the geopolitical entity called Ghana is too small to hold Nkrumah. Nkrumah is for Ghana, it's for West Africa, it's for Africa, and it's for the world. Comrades and friends, I'm sure you all watch football matches. Yes. I sometimes watch the Black Stars. And there have been occasions when I've seen Olele in the goalpost grab the ball, throw it to Michael Essien. From Michael Essien, it has gone to Pencil. From Pencil, it has gone to Michael Essien back. It has come back to Dede Ayew. And then the ball is passed to Asamoah, and he kicks it, and all of us shout, goal. Who scored the goal? So there is no doubt at all, there cannot be any doubt at all, that when it comes to the nationalist agitation for independence, it was Osadefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah who scored the goal.
The NDC was represented at the event and stressed their readiness to support the CPP to kick against moves to rewrite the country's history.
Nobody, whichever permutations, whichever distortions, changing names and changing dates will ever change the situation that Kwame Nkrumah was the founder of Ghana and all of it. I was worried when I saw somebody on television condemning the solidarity between the National Democratic Congress and the Convention People's Party. It is better to have supporters than to have nobody, to stand alone. Absolutely. With us around, I can assure you that Kwame Nkrumah's name will ever stand tall among all.
The biggest opposition party says it will resist any attempt by the ruling party to impose a distorted Dankwa history on Ghanaians. The NDC's reaction is in response to the president's decision to celebrate August 4 as Founders Day and September 21 at Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Day. But this move, the president says, is to recognize all who helped Ghana to attain independence while still maintaining Nkrumah's role in the independence struggle.
Scores of NDC faithfuls poured onto the street today for a health walk in commemoration of the Founders' Day, despite proposals by the NPP to change the day to Founders' Day. From Circle through to Adabraka and finally to the AMA Works Department at the Accra High Street, party faithfuls jeered up in songs in commemoration of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's birthday. Addressing party faithfuls, big stalwarts of the NDC said they will resist any attempt to change the Founders' Day celebration to Founders' Day, as it is divisive.
It is divisive, it is unhealthy. Political decision-making requires consensus building and compromises. This is something that the country has settled on already. We have seen various attempts to rewrite the history of this country to favor one or two people. And I think that it is just unfair and it is very divisive. It's our prayer that they don't carry on with this. Because if they do, what it means is that we're going to have a season of changes in what this country would know as Founders' Day into the future.
You cannot change history and you cannot change destiny. You understand? So I think what we know and what we are all used to should remain. And I believe any other holiday can come, but this particular day is the day that the founder of this country, Osadefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, was born. And any country, any nation that does not honor its heroes is not worth dying for.
Normally in the football team, we have a star player. And the star player is well celebrated. A lot of people contributed to the independence of Ghana, a lot of people. But there was a star player. The star player recognized in the whole of the world, the whole of Africa, celebrated all over. The Million Award
he got it, and we cannot decide to rewrite history. I think that as a nation, we should leave this behind us and think of how we can emancipate our people, help our people, get the best for them. That is where our focus should be.
Some participants in the walk also shared their reflections on the day.
When we talk of Founders Day, I am very sure, and I know history lets us know, Kwame Nkrumah didn't fight alone. He was with some people, you understand? So definitely, when we talk of Founders Day, it covers all of them. It's not peculiar to Kwame Nkrumah alone.
We know of one founder, which is Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. All over the world, history knows that he is the founder of Ghana.
Now, in a related development, Professor of African History at the James Madison University in the United States of America, David Owusu, has stated that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's role in the fight against colonialism was unparalleled. Now, to him, the debate about who founded Ghana is irrelevant in modern-day politics. He spoke at the official launch of the book Death of an Empire, which chronicles the political life of Ghana's first president. Here's a report by William Evans Nkun. Let's take a look.
Rhythms of the National Symphony Orchestra reminisces the days of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, a band formed during his administration in the 1950s. It was an occasion to further immortalize the founder of Ghana in a new book titled Death of an Empire, edited by Ivor Ajimandua, director of the Wole Soyinka Foundation in Johannesburg. Death of an Empire chronicled the life of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, his political ideology and policies which placed the Ghanaian economy in a path of growth. The book also brings into perspective the former president's political nemesis. The event brought together some historians, writers, and other government functionaries. Professor David Owusu said, during the era of political turmoil in the country, the issue of who founded Ghana was never a subject, and for him, the whole debate has lost its political merit.
We came to the trade fair site and for excursion. And interestingly, I saw General Kotoka, Afrifa, and Ankara as they were observing the parades around these beautiful exhibitions that were taking place. In those days, at least as pupils of our school, the question about who founded Ghana never came up. Rather, it was the issue about leadership. Who led the country to achieve political independence? And if you were to ask us, as young pioneer movement young men, the answer was very obvious, because it was part of our mantra. Nkrumah is our leader.
Deputy Chair of the Africa Union, Ambassador Kwesi Korte, described Dr. Kwame Nkrumah as an extraordinary politician.
Kwame Nkrumah as a politician was simply extraordinary. Inasmuch as leaders are creatures of their own people, you could say that Kwame Nkrumah was quintessentially Ghanaian. He carried with him all the lofty attributes of the Ghanaian people, as well as our many failings and shortcomings.
You're still here on News Tonight, right here on GHOne TV. Now, democracy, power for the people, by the people, of the people. But this is a far cry from the picture in Africa. Many of the African countries are under dictatorships clothed in false guise of democracy. For citizens in these countries, the voice to express themselves has been taken away without their consent. It is sad to know that many Africans suffer silently every day. Now, those who have shown some guts to stand up against these long regimes, there has been a price to pay. Della Michelle puts the following report together as Ghana marks the birthday of its first president.
With a population of 24.3 million, Angola is one of Africa's major oil producers. Angola is striving to tackle the physical, social and political legacy of a 27-year civil war that ravaged the country after independence. Angola's José Eduardo dos Santos of the ruling MPLA has been in power since 1979. He is Africa's second longest serving head of state after Equatorial Guinea's Teodoro Obiang. According to his citizens, he keeps tight control over all aspects of Angola's political life. Many Angolans credit the president for leading the country to recovery after the end of its 27-year civil war in 2002 and for turning the country's formerly socialist economy into one of the world's fastest growing, mainly on the back of Angola's prodigious war wealth. Some, however, accuse him of authoritarianism, staying in office for too long and failing to distribute the proceeds from the oil boom more widely. In 2008, his party won the country's first parliamentary elections in 16 years. A new constitution approved in 2010 substituted direct election of the president with a system under which the top candidate of the largest party in parliament becomes president. He has ruled Angola for 38 years and in August 2017 miraculously decided not to run for office any longer. Time will tell. In Equatorial Guinea, a small country on the west coast of Africa, the country struck oil in 1995 and is now being cited as a textbook case of the resource curse or the paradox of plenty. Francisco Macias Nguema seized power in 1979, making him the first president. His reign of terror prompted a third of the population to flee. Obiang Nguema is Africa's longest-serving leader and has been described by right organizations as one of Africa's most brutal dictators. But the power craze in Africa does not end there. Egypt is long known for its pyramids and ancient civilization. It is the largest Arab country and has played a central role in Middle Eastern politics in modern times with a population of 83.9 million. Egypt's teeming cities and almost all agricultural activity are concentrated along the banks of the Nile and on the river's delta. Deserts occupy most of the country. The economy depends heavily on agriculture, tourism and cash remittances from Egyptians working abroad, mainly in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries. In May 2005, the country held a referendum which backed constitutional amendment allowing multiple candidates at presidential elections. This was after months of opposition protests. In November 2010, parliamentary polls followed protests against alleged vote rigging. Hosni Mubarak was at the helm of affairs for nearly 30 years, covering this period. In Burkina Faso, President Blaise Compaoré won a third straight term in office. The ruling party won a majority in parliamentary polls in May 2007. July 2013, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets over plans to create a Senate. Opposition leaders said the move would allow President Compaoré to extend his rule. 2014 October witnessed more mass protests against proposed constitutional changes to allow the president another 5 years in power. This mass uprising drove President Compaoré from office and a transitional government took charge. Compaoré stayed in power for 27 years. This craze to change constitutional term limits and prolong stay in power is a curse affecting most countries on the continent. In Togo, Gasimbe Eyadema came to power in 1967 after participating in 2 successful coups. Until his death in 2005, he was Africa's longest-serving president, having ruled for 38 years. Now his son is in power, and between the two have ruled Togo for more than 50 years. It is not surprising, therefore, that the people have risen up, demanding change and for an end to the Nyasimbe dynasty. On 19th August, a protest in the country saw 7 dead opposition leaders arrested and handed jail terms. Since then, opposition numbers have been swelling up in intermittent protests to demand change. In Uganda, the country has moved one step closer to having a president for life. Over the past few months, Ugandans have argued over a proposal to scrape age limits for presidential candidates. The country's lawmakers this week agreed to table a bill to remove rules barring anyone over the age of 75 from running for the country's highest office. 73-year-old Museveni has been in power for more than 30 years. He will be 2 years older than the current age limit when the country goes to the polls in 2021. If members of parliament succeed in scraping the age limit, he could be in office for the rest of his life. An opportunity by leaders to govern and provide socio-economic amenities in several African countries have become family legacies as these leaders entrench their political hold. Where lies Africa's democracy?
Now, in this conversation, we'll be speaking to some representatives across the continent to get a sense of what is happening in their various countries. But before we do that, a synopsis of what is occurring in other countries as far as this phenomenon is concerned. You've had, cases like Paul Biya, who's stayed in power for long. We saw Yahya Jammeh not too long ago, who was ousted by the people of Gambia as well. I mean, not before his time were northern neighbors, Burkina Faso, who equally saw Blaise Compaoré being kicked out of office. And so there's quite a plethora of examples that we will be looking at this evening. Well, the very first one is Egypt from North Africa, and they've equally had their own share of longevity of presidents or long-serving presidents that have ruled the country for more than 3 decades. And in the person of Hosni Mubarak, who came in through a military regime when he took over after the assassination of then President Anwar Sadat. And in 2005, the country went through a referendum which backed the constitutional amendment allowing multiple candidates for presidential elections. This wasn't the case before. So the question we ask, why are we getting countries post-colonialism where presidents are putting in place systems and structures that prevent multiple candidates from contesting for elections? Now, following mass protests in 2010, well, Hosni Mubarak was ousted during the Arab Spring. First country to have seen that experience. In West Africa, Paul Biya, I mentioned earlier, has been in power for as long as 1982. Now, he's seen as one of Africa's most entrenched leaders ideologically. Now, in April 2008, Cameroon's parliament passed a controversial amendment to their constitution to enable him run for office for a third term in 2011. Now, he went on to win a new 7-year term in October, in that particular elections in October. Now, there have been consistent calls for Paul Biya, for example, to step aside. There's always clashes between the French-speaking side and the English-speaking side of the Cameroonian public. Away from Cameroon, you see Equatorial Guinea. Francisco Maïga Nguema, who seized power in 1979. This makes him the longest serving president in Africa. Now, Mr. Obiang is Africa's long-serving president. I mentioned that earlier. And he's proposed to change the constitution and this is a referendum in 2011. He has ruled for 38 years. So you're seeing presidents who have ruled countries in excess of 30 years. Then we go to Angola. You saw Angola earlier in the report to say Eduardo dos Santos, who has been ruling the country since the country gained independence. He also seized power in 1979. And in his case, in 2017, that's 2 months ago, he decided that he was no longer going to contest in the elections. As to whether that will materialize at the next general election in Angola, we're not too sure. But there's been consistent calls for him to equally step aside. Unfortunately, we are getting some news that he is not going to contest in this election. Then off to the Gambia, where ousted president who is now in exile as far as his own country is concerned, in the person of Yahya Jammeh, who has a very long and interesting name, practically naming himself after every single project he ever commissioned when he was head of state. Being interviewed by the BBC, and he made some very pronounced statements. Quote, his fate is in the hands of Almighty Allah. He will deliver to the Gambian people if he has to rule the country for 1 billion years. I mean, these are countries that are supposed to be representing participatory democracy to a point. And you're a head of state who thinks it is okay for him to be in office to rule a country for 1 billion years. That is quite a worrying phenomenon. And he goes on in that particular interview a couple of years ago to state that I will not bow down before anybody except the Almighty Allah, and if they don't like that, they can go to hell. It's not something we want to be celebrating in Africa as far as the longevity of presidents are concerned. Now we have a colleague who's a journalist from Uganda in the person of Richard Eku to give us some perspectives, because Uganda equally is on the list of countries that have long-serving presidents, in the person of Yoweri Museveni, who we understand is equally putting in plans to amend the constitution to allow him to run for office for a 3rd term. This is probably going to take him in excess of 30 years of being in office. What Ugandans make of this before we get to other churches. So thank you for joining us, Richard.
Yes, good evening.
Well, what is happening in Uganda now? We know Museveni has had this plan for a very long time. He's one of those that does not subscribe to, presidents having shorter terms. I mean, you've had some East African country leaders in the person of Paul Kagame, for example, who seconds this particular idea. But how are Ugandans dealing with his plan to run for a 3rd term in office?
Thank you so much, my brother. Today there was drama in Parliament and in parts of the city. Today is the day that the private members' bill was supposed to be tabled in Parliament by the Igara West MP, Paul Magesi, but that was not possible. It was deferred to next week by the Speaker of Parliament. It was after the opposition members protested, and there was total chaos in Parliament this afternoon. There was tight security, there was heavy presence of security outside Parliament, and the opposition MPs were like, they cannot continue like this, and the Speaker had to adjourn the Parliament for some minutes. Then later on, it deferred to next week. But otherwise, the situation on the ground, people are bitter. The Constitution of Uganda has been amended now 3 times, and if this time the move goes through, it will be amended the 4th time. Since the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda was promulgated on the 8th of October 1995 by the Constitutional Assembly, replacing the 1967 Constitution, the